my video is all about living in recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. And I suppose I'm not sure why I'm doing this video, other than I want to share a message of experience, strength and hope about what recovery can be on a daily basis and what makes it work for me. And the principal reason why I stay in recovery one day at a time has a lot to do with fellowship, where I meet friends, meet new people coming into a fellowship designed for one purpose only, a desire to stop drinking. So what is that fellowship? It's Alcoholics Anonymous, the very last place I ever wanted to be in my life. It meant removal of my best friend for many years, that's alcohol, from my daily living. And it was a hard thing, the very idea of giving up alcohol for any reason, until I realised not only was it killing me, it had almost killed me more than once, and I'd been hospitalised and all those horrible things that happen to us when we're out of control. So I do share about recovery. I'm not sure how often I will do it from here on in. I've been doing it on a daily basis for some years. And have I still got a message? Well, I hope so. It's all about experience, strength and hope. So how does fellowship help me? The best way is to share the AA Preamble, which is shared at every meeting, and then work it from there, see what happens. I don't know what I'm going to say in this video. I've got some ideas, and also what happened today. So AA Preamble, this is what the AA Preamble says, and what we share at the beginning of every meeting. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And that last part of the sentence, or the last sentence on this piece of paper, which you can't see too well here, says our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And we do it in a variety of ways. But the best way is face-to-face, listening to the voices of people who are struggling with the idea of what is sobriety, being in sobriety, being overly confident or not confident at all about their sobriety, and just sharing generally in an open, honest way what's going on. And today's meeting was wonderful. It was full of experience, strength and hope of what it's like to deal with Christmas and New Year. How to deal with the obvious temptation of joining in with other people. And it's very easy to do. And the principal share was great. I can't talk specifics because anonymity applies. I don't talk about other people, but I can share the impact of what that meeting did for me. So it reinforced something which happened on Christmas Day for me, which was something I did whilst I remained sober, but the challenge that it gave me was quite surprising. I've never opened a bottle of wine in recovery until Christmas Day. My auntie and my mother decided they would like a glass of wine, and they can, because they're not alcoholics. They don't have the malady of I cannot stop what I'm doing once I've started. So as they are not so strong on the wrist, and the bottle needed to be opened, I opened it, and it was like a motorway map in my head. The knowledge, even though it's years and years since I've opened a bottle of wine, the idea of a drink being an arm's length away came to mind, and that it was in my hands. And for somebody who is on the road to recovery, then I guess that is very familiar action. But if you've been in sobriety for a few years, it is a real surprise just how easy it is to open a bottle of wine and think it's an arm's length away. And it was a very uncomfortable feeling. inasmuch I don't drink anymore, one day at a time. But it was a strong feeling in me. So what did I do? Well, there were all-day meetings of AA down at my local favourite venue, I guess, which is Flood Street in Chelsea, in London, UK. And I didn't share in the meeting there because it didn't really register just what a powerful effect that had on me. And it was only when the person sharing today mentioned just how difficult Christmas can be and the New Year and what people are doing around me, like drink and then get merry, that I might have felt left out. The motorway map in my head said, you know, what an easy thing to do, to open up a bottle of wine. And the worst part is, what an easy thing it would be to drink a glass of wine. And of course I didn't. But, you know, familiarity can breed contempt. So I hope I don't go through that experience of having to open a bottle of wine for someone for some time. In fact, I'd be very happy not to open one on a daily basis for the rest of my life. And why is that? And the answer is simple. It is so easy to slip backwards. Very easy to slip backwards. And a moment of weakness or a moment of misunderstanding can lead us straight back into the malady of drinking. And it would be the first drink that did the damage. It would make me feel upset, worried and concerned. And of course some people have relapsed over Christmas. And the point is, how do we help them? Well, there's a very simple answer for me, which is to make a difference between the human being that we are and the behaviour which is good or bad for us. So we can love people and hate their behaviour. That is, when we encounter people who are still drinking and it's out of control. We can love them and hate their behaviour. And if a person, or even me, could relapse, then I have to have enough love inside me to say, my God, I've made a mistake. I hate what I've just done. And then get back on the wagon. The wagon of water, or whatever it might be, as long as it's not alcohol. So, you know, it's hard work. So January for me is all about step one. And why is January important to me? Well, there's lots of literature in the fellowship around what is step one, the first step that we take in our way through to 12 steps and living the principles of our program, the 12-step program. Principles into practice, and they are just simply suggested steps. And one of the things about meeting tonight is people were so open and honest. They shared their resentment and anger around some of the people making speeches, or what they perceived as speeches. But in fact, whatever a person says within the room of AA, if there's no time limit, they can keep on going till the end of the meeting. Not by choice, I hope, and only by the very need that they need to speak what is on their mind. So we practice tolerance and love around people who need to speak for longer, and sometimes I speak for longer as well, which I do here. So January, I was an email came through from a daily recovery website, and for January the 3rd, the first thing I noticed it said is the Serenity Prayer, which I'll share now. And this thing of God, which really gets up people's noses and was talked about a lot today. Some people believe in God, some people are agnostic, some people are atheist, some people just like to wonder what their good conscience is suggesting they do. And the Serenity Prayer reads as this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it then says, thy will, not mine, be done. So that Serenity Prayer, accept the things I cannot change in me and also in other people. I am powerless over people, places and things. I realise these days, even if they were compliant and they didn't like it, they would go off and do it differently, wouldn't they? So there is something about loving people and also hating behaviour, or disliking behaviour, or having to accept that people just are the way they are. So the things I cannot change, people, places and things, and if I took a drink, my life would be difficult again. Courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, is all about what I can do on a daily basis in the moment of now. What can I do which is the best choice given my life situation? So that Serenity Prayer is of huge importance to me on a daily basis. So grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I can't change the world. I need to look at the world as it is and see how my choices may fit. Courage to do those choices, and the wisdom to know the difference, what I can do and what I can't do. I learn the wisdom every day of where my free choices are in life with sobriety. And that's so important. So January is all about step 1 for me, and you'll find it on my other videos. But the email goes on to say, powerless. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, from the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, page 21. So yes, powerlessness. What does it mean to be powerless over alcohol? Well, the simple answer is, if I take one drink, the likelihood is that I might continue unless I got myself together very quickly. But the problem is, the motorway map in my head says it's easy, once you've done one, to take another. And when people come back from relapse and feel so guilty and shameful about their behaviour, they need to keep on loving themselves enough to say, yes, I'm powerless over alcohol, and if I take a drink, life is unmanageable again. So that first step is always the most powerful one in terms of retaining personal choices in sobriety. And it goes on to say, it is no coincidence that the very first step mentions powerlessness. An admission of a personal powerlessness over alcohol is the cornerstone of the foundation of recovery. I've learned that I do not have the power and control I once thought I had. This is referring to alcohol. I am powerless over what people, and also, it goes on to say, I am powerless over what people think of me, which is true. People will think what they think. I am powerless over having just missed the bus. I am powerless over how other people work or don't work the steps of AA. So in other words, we're all on a learning journey, some going quickly, some going slowly, like I did. I was a really rotten student. And then it says, but I've also learned I'm not powerless over some things. I am not powerless over my attitudes. They are actually formed by life experience. I am not powerless over negativity. I am not powerless over assuming responsibility for my own recovery. I have the power to exert a positive influence on myself, my loved ones, and the world in which I live. And that always reminds me of Desiderata by Max Ehrmann. Go placidly amidst the noise and haste. And there are so many wise words in that poem. I'll share it maybe another day, this January. So step 1, what is it? This book, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, is available from all good meetings of AA if they have the money to buy the literature. And don't forget, we're living in straitened times, so some meetings haven't got any literature. But you can get it online from the AA World Services if you're in America, or from your country website. I'm sure that they are able to supply it if you wish to get it that way. But you don't have to buy the book. If you go to meetings, it'll rub off over time. But if you do read it, it makes more sense to read it and then see, right, well, what am I going to do about it? And that's what I had to do. I had to really think hard and then stop thinking and start feeling life, because fellowship is all about emotional, spiritual well-being. But step 1 in this book, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. This is how it reads. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one. Of course. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. It is truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it from us. And that act of providence is probably called a moment of clarity about how am I going to deal with this situation now I realise that I am powerless over drinking. No other kind of bankruptcy is like this one. Alcohol. now has become the rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency and all will to resist its demands, that is, to keep on drinking. Once this stark fact is accepted, our bankruptcy as going human concerns is complete. So morally, physically, emotionally, spiritually bankrupt. No love for ourselves and hating the behaviour that we're exhibiting, what we're doing, the impossibility of stopping. I promised to stop, I can't. I gave it up for a day, I'm back on it tomorrow. That's how it works when we're in the malady, in the problem and not in the solution. But upon entering AA, we soon take quite another view of this absolute humiliation, because it is, we are bankrupt. We perceive that only through utter defeat are we able to take our first steps towards liberation and strength. Our admissions of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built. We know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he has first accepted his devastating weakness and all its consequences. And that's so important. Once we realise that we're stuck in a merry-go-round of, well, it's a sad go-round, actually, of behaviour around drinking which we cannot break, a cycle we cannot break. Once we get to that point and actually realise that this is killing us and bankrupting us in all ways. We may still have money in the bank, some of us did, and then we were homeless, which I ended up, or we can still be multimillionaires, or just common, simple people trying to live life, but stuck in this malady. Yes, we know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he has first accepted his devastating weakness and all its consequences. Until he so humbles himself, and in the word humble, it simply means, right, I'm in a place where I need to learn something. Humility is then reconstructing our ability to learn and let go prejudice against ourselves and let go the prejudice we feel from those who judge us. Until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be will be precarious and almost impossible, because we're still trying to go back to how we used to be, and we don't want to let go of our best friend, our drinking. Of real happiness, he will find none at all, proved beyond doubt by an immense experience. This is one of the facts of AA life. The principle that we shall find no enduring strength until we first admit complete defeat is the main taproot from which our whole society is sprung and flowered. So by admitting complete defeat and saying, I need help, I don't need to be, it's not about fixing ourselves, it's about generating a new way of looking at the world without a drink inside us. When first challenged to admit defeat, most of us revolted. In fact, I was very revolting. We had approached AA expecting to be taught self-confidence, which is all, it is actually part of it. Humility is the true strength and confidence to keep on learning life, and learning that life is the way it is, and how do we fit, and what are our best choices. Then we had been told that so far as alcohol is concerned, self-confidence was no good whatever. In fact, it was a total liability. In early days, definitely, because we think we know what we're doing. We still think we are in control, and we can control drink. And the absolute truth is, if we actually say, no, I can't control drink, I'm absolutely powerless over it, I've got a better chance of learning how to do something new. So it's letting go the old ideas and the old thinking. My old thinking kept me drinking and out there in the world of the malady all the time. It just did. So I drank for 35 years and ended up completely out of it. So it is a total liability to think we can go back to our old ways, and often trying to rejoice life sober by being with those environments which are still bad for us, especially at Christmas and New Year, which is why often a lot of people come in after the New Year if they've relapsed or they've heard of AA. But who wants to go to AA? It's the very antichrist of what you want to do if you're a drinker. So it's really hard work. Of our sponsor, well, then we have been told that so far as alcohol is concerned, self-confidence was no good whatever. In fact, it was a total liability. So as long as we still feel that we're in control of drink, or we think we can control it, and we think we control our environment, and we think we control other people, places and things, well, it doesn't work. Won't work. We let go of that, and we come to an understanding that we need to make some good choices. Our sponsors declared that we were victims of a mental obsession so subtly powerful that no amount of human willpower could break it. Well, I reckon that's one person's willpower. And if ever there is a God, God works through people. And what I've found in AA is that there's a lot of people out there in the fellowship who've got decades of experience. And sometimes it's wonderful sharing from them, or it's absolutely inappropriate because it won't work for us. It's just their outlook. That's the way of the world. AA is full of real people trying to be honest, open and willing to change. So we are what we are. Unique, authentic human beings. With one similarity. There was, they said, no such thing as the personal conquest of this compulsion by the unaided will. Relentlessly deepening our dilemma, our sponsors pointed out, and sponsors in AA are there for the 12-step program, to help us understand and work with a new attitude and a new set of behaviour, whatever is appropriate to us in our life, our reality as it is today. They're not there to tell you what to do. There's no rules in AA, only suggestions and principles. So important, because if there were rules, we'd all leave. We're anarchists. But we're democratic at the same time. Anarchic democracy is called. Yes, relentlessly deepening our dilemma. Our sponsors pointed out our increasing sensitivity to alcohol. Analogy, they called it. Yes, a malady, allergy, a disease, whatever you want to call it. It's called alcohol, and it's not very good for us anymore. The tyrant alcohol wielded a double-edged sword over us. First we were smitten by an insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking, and then by an allergy of the body that ensured we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process, because we are addicted physically to the alcohol, or whatever the substance might be. We've pharmaceuticals of any description, and also behaviour of any description which is addictive. Few indeed were those who, so assailed, had ever won through in single-handed combat. So on our own we struggle and die normally. So most people don't get to AA, and people who do get to AA often don't like it and don't come back. And they really do not come back, and they don't come back to life either, a lot of them. Or they have a life which is so troubled it's awful. Or they die early. It was a statistical fact that alcoholics almost never recovered on their own resources, and this had been true apparently ever since man had first crushed grapes. So some of us constitutionally, maybe we can keep on drinking and be the last man or woman standing. But what use is that if we're on our own? What use is it to be the last person standing? Who wants a drunk for a lover? Good question. But the trouble is, drunks attract drunks, and often we go on and on and on too long and find ourselves both in the same boat. And that is a calamity beyond belief. In AA's pioneering time, none but the most desperate cases could swallow and digest this unpalatable truth. Even these last gaspers often had difficulty in realizing how hopeless they actually were. But a few did, and when these laid hold of AA principles with all the fervour with which the drowning sees life preserves, they almost invariably got well. This is why the first edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, published when our membership was small, dealt with low-bottom cases only. But the problem is low-bottom or rock-bottom drunks. Rock bottom is rock bottom, no matter where you are, who you are, whether you've got a big house and 2 cars, or a castle. It's the same. The outlook is grim. But the rock-bottom cases came together. Many less desperate alcoholics tried AA, but did not succeed because they could not make the admission of hopelessness. So whilst on the material level we may seem to be going along, careering in our career to success, and then in my case, falling off the bloody mountain of career, because when I got to the top of it, it was all the same, more of the same old, and that broke me. Oh, and a nasty bully. Anyway, that's another story. It is a tremendous satisfaction to record that in the following years this changed. Alcoholics who still had their health, their families, their jobs, and even 2 cars in the garage began to recognise their alcoholism. So wherever rock bottom is, it's rock bottom. It's awful, terrible, isolated, and bleak and desolate. Those are my words. As this trend grew, they were joined by young people who scarcely were more than potential alcoholics. But what I know is that it doesn't matter what age you are, if you've got the malady and you take a drink or a drug or start adopting a certain behaviour which becomes repetitive and impossible to control, it doesn't matter what age you are. And in the fellowship around here we have young teens who demonstrate fantastic recovery one day at a time. They haven't forgotten how to learn. They still have the humility to learn and make mistakes and keep on learning. And they teach me every day that I need to break old habits. They were spared that last 10 or 15 years of literal hell the rest of us had gone through. Since step 1 requires an admission that our lives have become unmanageable, how could people such as these take this step? Well, I've seen it, I've witnessed it, and it works. Why? Because there is a need to change. Humility and learning is the key. It was obviously necessary to raise the bottom the rest of us had hit, to the point where it would hit them. Well, you know what? It hits home, because we know when we're in it. And then we are in denial, because we think we can self-will our way out on our own. It didn't work for me. By going back into our old drinking histories, we could show that years before we realised it, before we realised it, we were out of control, that our drinking even then was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. Well, you know what? I guess I was in a lot of denial. I didn't see the fatal progression. I didn't see the revival in hospital being necessary. I didn't see the necessity of a Roman Catholic priest coming to me in the middle of the night to give me extreme unction, and my reaction being so absolutely horrible towards him. I told him to fuck off, and he said, I asked him outright, are you here to give me the last rites? And he said, yes, you're down as a Catholic. And I said, I'm not a Catholic, fuck off. And he said, don't be so fussy. It was good for him to say that. He was being very gentle with me. Mind you, I didn't have much time left at that moment. Yeah, by going back in our own drinking histories, we could show that years before we realised it, we were out of control, that our drinking even then was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. To the doubters we could say, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking, bearing in mind, meanwhile, what we have told you about alcoholism. So, you know, if you do want to go out there and have another go, and you're still alive to, well, it's a question of whether you're alive or dead. You know, we can be part of the living dead syndrome, because we are not actually in any way there making freedom of choice based on our realistic opportunities. This attitude brought immediate and practical results. Well, it did for some. As I said, I was a poor learner. It took me a few years and a few goes. But then, that's me. You know, I was taught to stand on my own 2 feet, be a man, be the last man standing, be the this, that and the other, be something, and I still didn't know who I was. Yes, then discovered that when one alcoholic had planted in the mind of another the true nature of his malady, that person could never be the same again. Following every spree, he would say to himself, maybe those AAs were right. Well, I didn't. I just kept on drinking because I just didn't want to live, but I didn't know how to die. I kept on waking up, and it was horrible. Those last few weeks were extraordinarily bleak. I'm not saying that to over-dramatise, it was just horrible. My horrible history. After a few such experiences, often years before the onset of extreme difficulties, he would turn to us convinced he had hit rock bottom as truly as any of us. John Barleycorn himself had become our best advocate. And John Barleycorn is like your conscience sitting on your shoulder, and it mutters, I can control it, I'll have one. But the other side of the coin is the good conscience, and deep inside within, if there's any love left for ourselves, we hate our behaviour, and either we perish or get into recovery. It's as simple as that. I don't think there's any sort of middle ground, or at least I've not found anybody who's found it very adequate, because if it's about control and preservation, control is not freedom. And I have freedom of choice, and I don't control anything. It sounds to me like some people are being merry outside. Why all this insistence that every AA must hit bottom first? The answer is that few people will sincerely try to practice the AA program unless they have hit bottom. For practicing AA's remaining 11 steps means the adoption of attitudes and actions that almost no alcoholic who is still drinking can dream of taking. Who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant about themselves, let alone anybody else? And that's why I like the meeting tonight. There was rigorous honesty, and tolerance will come in time. Who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitution for harm done? Who cares anything about a higher power, let alone meditation and prayer? Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer? No, the average alcoholic, self-centred in the extreme, because that's what drink does to us, makes us completely self-centred. We can't see out of the problem. Doesn't care for this prospect, so if you're still drinking, you hate AA. And if you get to AA, you probably still hate it for a while, because it's asking you to do the actual opposite of what our whole life has been doing. Doesn't care for this prospect, unless he has to do these things in order to stay alive himself. And that's the question. It's the big question. Do I feel able to live a life? And when we're still drinking, probably most of us said no. So when that moment of clarity comes, which is, I need help, I cannot do this on my own, that is the turning point for many of us. Under the lash of alcoholism, we are driven to AA, and there we discover the fatal nature of our situation. Then and only then do we become as open-minded to conviction and as willing to listen as the dying can be. But in the malady, I was still telling the priest where to go, and he said, don't be so fussy. And I didn't take it seriously, because I was insane at the time, and driven mad by drink, and I couldn't stop. We stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless obsession from us. And the great gift of step 1, where it says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. It's 2 parts. The admitted part, I can remember my first meeting. I admitted it. I had no clue what powerless over alcohol meant. And because I was so angry, resentful against myself and the world, because if I could resent myself, it gave me permission to resent everything around me. After my first declaration and admission, I went to the pub. And it was 5 years before I got back again. Not because of anything AA did. It was what I did. Because I wanted to be the person I thought I was, and I wanted to be the person I thought I wanted to be. I didn't realise that if I am open to life, the choices and the freedoms are magnificent. It doesn't mean being top dog. It means the magnificence of living one day at a time. And that our lives have become unmanageable, well, if you're living on the streets and you dare not contact anyone who knows you, and you're pretending to be okay, and you're pretending and you're shutting the world out, and you're still drinking, that's unmanageability, and that's where I was. So step 1, January, in this book, and then in the daily reflections, if you're interested. It's if you're interested. It means you're interested in life. Not my life, but your life. This book, which is here, available for your friendly AA meetings. But the most important thing that I've learned over all of this, it doesn't matter what book you read, it doesn't matter what I say, it's always the many voices in the rooms of AA which count. And you hear people who are cross, happy, sad, in love with life, spiritually in the moment, spiritually hurt beyond belief, spiritually just making it into a meeting, and then coming away a little bit more clear that one drink is not going to help ever, and that it is possible one day at a time to live life with new attitudes, new behaviours, with humility. Humility is key to everything. Learning and it's learning life all over again, and it's beautiful and it's horrible, because we feel everything as if we've been shot through with feelings, because the suppression of alcohol has kept them down for so long, and all these feelings come out, which is why meetings are so important, which is why we try to be open, honest and willing about our feelings. And if we feel resentful, and there was some resentments tonight, which is great, because they were shared and not bottled up and suppressed. Because suppression leads back to the malady, openness leads to the solution, learning life again. 1990 is what is suggested in early recovery, 90 meetings in 90 days. I did more than that, because a sniff of a drink on the way to a meeting could divert me. So when I was able to walk a long way, I walked a long way every day, because I could. Sober first, and the rest of life can happen. It sounds selfish, but if you aren't sober, life will not happen. And in any moment, in any day, that's Serenity Prayer, whether I believe God is X, Y or Z, or I'm an atheist, or I'm an agnostic. Sometimes it flips around. If it's going well, there must be a God. If it's going badly, it must be me and my attitudes. So the world is open, and we have freedom of choice, given what is possible in our societies, our communities, the possibilities, and accepting what is rather than what we think we want. So that Serenity Prayer always helps. And no, I'm not going to get myself a motorbike, because I can't afford it and I don't need one. It's no use to me. But I had a sort of feeling I would like one today. Totally impractical. And that Serenity Prayer, I mean, that's just a bad example, but the Serenity Prayer is what counts. Can do, can't do. To God, as a meditation, reflection, an expression, whatever it is. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference for me is just for today.